I know dropping your violin is bad enough, but imagine you're in the middle of playing a violin concerto and next minute your violin goes flying through the air. And it's not just any violin, it's a 1780s Guadagnini violin worth over $1 million. That would just freak you out. Oh my God. Accidents do happen. Sometimes people do things without thinking. Now, I don't think in this situation you can really blame the conductor, because if you have a tall conductor and the stage crew puts them together with a violinist and they're in a cramped space, I guess they do have to work out, like have a bit of a risk assessment and make sure that the conductor and the soloist are far enough apart for something like this not to happen. But anyway, I'm pretty sure stage managers will take note of this incident and will, be a lot more careful in the future. Well, at least I hope that. But what would you do, or what do you do if something like that happens to you? What if your instrument drops onto the ground? What would you do? Of course, you'd take it to a violin maker, but is there something you can do in the moment to check the instrument? So in my opinion, there are 3 things that you should be doing if something like that happens. The first one is a really careful visual inspection. So you take the instrument and you very carefully check over every little part of the instrument. And when I say every little part, I mean check the ribs, make sure there's no cracks, check the joints of the ribs and top and back just visually. So you check over the entire instrument to see if anything looks damaged or looks different. Of course, your heart would be beating really fast at that point because you have just had a huge shock of dropping your instrument. The next would be a visual inspection of the top plate and the back. Just very carefully. Firstly, maybe check if the bridge has moved and check underneath the bridge feet. If you have a fairly good idea of where your instrument impacted, you may also have a better idea of where to look. If an instrument was to impact this way onto the bridge, there's a very big chance that it will either develop a bass bar crack or a sound post crack. I personally have had to repair many cracks like that have been caused that way. The next thing you would do would be to check the neck and scroll and just make sure that everything on the neck and scroll looks okay, that there are no visual signs of cracking, especially if the instrument has fallen onto the scroll. Now, if everything looks okay, I would recommend gently knocking around the instrument, listening for a different sound, like listening for open joints, and just making sure there are no buzzing noise. This instrument has a slight buzzing noise. Can you hear that? But that buzzing noise is actually just caused by the chin rest being loose. So first, a very careful visual inspection. Second, knocking around the instrument to see if there are any open joints or any kind of buzzing noises. Third, carefully play the instrument. Now, if the instrument fails any of those tests, I would highly recommend to loosen the strings carefully. It is best to take the tension off the strings. There are 27 kilos weighing down onto the top plate of the instrument, and it is absolutely worth taking the tension down. This is one of my beautiful Fiamme Master violins, which are actually for sale on my website. They're made from the wood of the Fiamme Valley, which is where Stradivarius got his wood from. Absolutely beautiful, and they sound amazing. So if you visually see some kind of damage, like open joints are often, if they're just slight joints, are not so bad. But if there are cracks, I would recommend immediately taking the tension down at least a few notes. So there is very little tension on the instrument. You could even put something soft underneath here and take the tension down further. Or if you know how to do it, you could take the strings and bridge off altogether. But then just be careful where you put them in your case so they don't rattle around. If the instrument passes the visual and the knocking inspection, and you play the instrument afterwards, so it's also very good to see if you can be aware where the instrument impacted. So next, you just actually check that the sound of the instrument is still the same. Now, if all of these things check out, you should be able to continue playing. But if any of these tests fail, make sure you make an appointment or you go and see your violin maker as quickly as possible. But also, if everything checks out, the instrument works well, I would still go and see your violin maker and get it professionally checked over. And that's basically it. In this case, she was very lucky. The instrument fell. You can see the way it fell. I mean, it's a bit hard to see because it's happening behind her dress, but it fell down, and I think it sort of fell onto here, which is very kind of lucky because it's one of the stronger points of the instrument, and it ended up just with a couple of open joints, which are very easy to repair. But, you know, all sorts of things can happen, you know, from smashed scrolls to cracks to all sorts of things. So always be extremely careful with your instrument. Make sure you have got a safe distance between you and other people when you're playing. Also, make sure you don't open your instrument on the floor or your case on the floor and then keep your instrument down there, because people also walk on the floor. I always prefer having it on a chair, so up a little bit higher. But also when it's in the case, I don't think it's a great idea just to leave the case open. I think you should just close the case. Make sure that it's closed. So I know you might have to get your instrument quickly, but if the case falls down, at least the instrument's safe. So yes, accidents happen and they're horribly shocking. I have done repairs for string players who have tripped and fallen onto their instruments. I have done repairs for string players where the microphone has fallen onto the instrument. I've done repairs for players who fainted on stage and fell on the instrument. I've done repairs for people who have dropped instruments, and I've done repairs for people whose instruments were damaged in transit on planes. So there are so many different ways that, you know, that accidents can happen and instruments can break. The important thing is to try and get them repaired as quickly as possible, because that way you've got a chance of getting the instrument repaired and back to its original state as quickly as possible. Anyway, just thought this video popped up, and, you know, a lot of sensationalist stuff coming up, like people, just want to show you how some someone dropped their instrument, poor person, $1 million instrument. I mean, she would have been absolutely distraught, having the instrument knocked out of her hand. I mean, what a shock. And I would say that the conductor would have been just as distraught, I mean, of course he didn't intend to flick a violin out of someone's hand. Also, he wasn't standing too close to her. He was standing within the confines of his, his conducting area. Like I said, I think it is a stage management problem. They obviously need to allow the conductor to lean right over and wave their arms around, especially if you have an animated conductor. As well as the string player having the space to play their instrument. So there's a little bit of this management, and I think the conductor and player, it's good if the conductor and player can be aware of this, maybe even have a very short discussion about it. But yeah, absolutely. How shocking. So it's good to hear that they were able to repair the instrument and there really wasn't much damage. So look after your instrument, be careful. If accidents happen, check the instrument over carefully. Maybe get your violin maker to check it as well, just to make sure. Keep making beautiful music. If you found this video helpful, click the like button, subscribe to my channel, and there's a little bell. You will find out every time I post a new video. Keep making beautiful music, and I will see you next time. Stay safe and keep your instruments safe. Bye.